Well, I think the first thing, Dave, is that a coach has to look at his or her areas that they may have some hidden biases. We all have hidden biases, and it's recognizing those. And that's why one of the things we've been doing the webinars with college teams, we ask each player and the coach to do a self-analysis of, who am I? Because if you're at peace with yourself, you can be at peace with anyone, no matter what their ethnicity is. And one of the things, especially for majority people who are coaching, male or female, if you're dealing with minorities, you have to have some sense of understanding what those minorities are going through or have been through. And especially, there's a great book called White Fragility. It's written by Robin DiAngelo, and it talks about the whole issue of social justice. It talks about how there are differences between races and ethnicities at many, many different levels. And one, in order to coach people who are minorities, and it could be international students, but Black or Latino students, or even poor white kids, is you have to understand what is that culture, what are the cultural differences? And then you must identify that you want the best players. You don't care what their color is. You don't care what their ethnicity is. You don't care what their socioeconomic status is. But how does that young man or young woman compete for the institution that you've given them an opportunity to attend? But it all starts with you understanding what your biases are and understanding that biases can hurt you, it can hurt your program, and it can hurt your institution. I think that when you are, let's say you're recruiting an African-American students, male or female, or you're recruiting Latino students, I think that when you talk to the athlete, the student athlete, and to their families, you talk about the diversity at your institution. You talk about, here are the sources where you can be comfortable. It might be the multicultural center on your campus. It could be for Latin American students, there could be the Hispanic Chamber or the Hispanic Student Council. If you're international students, every campus has an international student office, and that's places you can refer them to. And I think you want to talk to them about, hey, maybe we've had issues on campus, maybe we haven't, but if there are problems on campus, obviously the first person you want to come to is the coach, but the coach wants to know who is your officer of equity and compliance person. What's the breakdown of minority faculty on your campus? Number of faculty. What are the number of minority students on your campus? You want to be armed with that information to let those students know that yes, the institution X, Y, and Z, we really welcome a diverse population. Not only do we welcome, we have this support system, and I, as a coach, am going to support you and your family in making sure you have a great experience at the institution you have chosen to compete. I think one of the things is you want to look at what is the culture of the institution. What are some of the things that you have done in the past as a group? So maybe some of the things would be, I know that I was talking with Nick Zazula. We did a session with his team, and he had his student athletes read books that were relative to social justice. That's one way of showing of being inclusion or being inclusive of students of color. You might have the students reading a book. Ray Suarez has a book about Latino Americans. That might be one way for you to show your students who are coming in and your students who are there that this is something that we really value from that standpoint. I think the other thing is that, um, and I learned this when I was on a call with our friends out at Claremont Mud Scripts. Sometimes among teams, and if you have a diverse population, there's kidding that goes on. When I played, we had Italians and we had Greeks uh, and Caucasians on the team, and we could poke and make fun with each other, Dave, uh, within the family. But the diversity person out at Claremont who made a great observation. That's okay, but when you have new people coming in, it may be a white person who's never been around black students or black people. It could be a black person who's never been around white people. Could be a Latino who's never been around blacks or whites. And you are having that same locker room banter that's okay with the current group, but you must educate that group coming in as to, we're a family, and when we are picking on each other, that is it's in fun. It's not a pejorative thing that's happening. And I think for me, on these things we've been doing relative to these discussions, that was a really learning curve, because I was thinking about it from a coach and and as a jock mentality. But when she said that, it made sense that you have to integrate your new students into the culture that you have on that campus. And I think the other thing is you must have a blunt conversation with the parents of the students you are recruiting about, here's how we are on this campus. Here's how I am as a person, and your son or your daughter will never be verbally abused because of their race or ethnicity as long as they're under my watch and care. One of the discussions, besides diversity, is how are you a good teammate? There's a great book, and the book is called 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. It's written by a young woman named Dinah Chapman, who was a tennis player, but she's become pretty globally known for empowering women, but also doing diversity. And when they go into corporations and do their workshops, there's a line that they draw, a black line across this board or the paper. And above the line is conscious leadership, and below the line is unconscious leadership. Well, as a human being and as a coach and as a player, you want to be a conscious leader and a conscious person, because those are the people who are inclusive. They collaborate with people. They listen. They actually do listen. They just don't shake their head. And if you're below the line, you're a little duplicitous. And good teams have most of their people who are conscious leaders and good members of the team, and good coaches have to be conscious leaders, and they must listen. And if you're going to have an open conversation, then you must accept that. And then you must be able to let your players express their opinions. And I think when you have discussions, whether it's on, not maybe so much on politics, but you talk about social justice, that can be a pretty interesting conversation. But you talk about the history of movements in this country, the fact that women had to fight, how many hundreds of years after the 1776 Constitution was driven to get the right to vote. So I think that that's what you have to do, is you set up discussions, because we don't want only to make good young men and women tennis players coming out of our colleges. We want to also have good citizens that we help cultivate positive attitudes when they're with us for the 4 years that they're playing tennis at our institutions. I think, first of all, you want to try to deal with it within the family. And you want to have open conversations, because not everyone's going to agree. But the one thing that you must establish as a coach is that we have a diverse group of men and women on this team. If you're going to be a member of the team at whatever the institution is, then you must honor everyone who's on this team. Don't have to like everybody, but you must honor their right as a human being and their right to function. Now, if we have issues, and those issues are based on real problems, if someone's being a slacker or someone is hooking in practices, then we deal with that. Now, if there are issues that are either gender-based or race-based or thetic-based, then every campus has an office of compliance and an office of, there's multicultural offices, but also people who deal with issues of discrimination. You know, that then could be taken to that level. You would hope it wouldn't be, but there are people on your campus that will come in and help you resolve those kinds of issues. But hopefully you can resolve those within the family of the team. I think that as a coach, you treat everybody the same, no matter what their background is from that standpoint. And you as a coach, because players know sometimes who a coach likes and doesn't like. So you want to hope that you, once again, you're getting rid of your own bias, because who's going to recruit someone that you really don't like? I mean, that's a double-edged sword, isn't it? From that standpoint. So you usually are recruiting people that you like and people you want to be around your family and people that you want to eventually someday go to their weddings or their baptisms or whatnot of their children. But I think the thing is, to keep it in the forefront is that you talk about team and family, and that's something you should do every day. We're the family, we're coming together, we're going to practice. But you also might have conversations about social issues. I mean, right now, the biggest topic and that got everything going was the whole thing of Black Lives Matter. And when people say that, no one is saying that white lives don't matter. What they're saying is because all lives matter. That's right there that's something you have to establish. But the people who have, in most recent times, relative to television and police action, have been black males. Well, that's the reality from that standpoint. And you want to have conversations about how does that happen and why does that happen? And how do we go about changing it from that standpoint? But I think but you also want to talk about issues of gender, because how men and women communicate and interact is critical from the standpoint of keeping your team. And if you have men and women's teams, that there's a respect of the men have respect for the women's team members and the women have respect for the men's team members, because that could become an issue if you don't. But I think the coach sets the tone and then has conversations, and you can have conversations on a lot of things besides race. The issue of voting, the issue of when you talk about, do we want to legalize marijuana, things like that. Those are conversations that a team can have and really have a great discourse on. I don't think that, because it's a two-edged sword, when one tries to take a political stand, okay? But there are things that a coach and a team can do within the community, because see, I'm a great believer in actions speak louder than words. So everyone that I've talked with on our discussions on race, I've said to these teams, one of the things you should do is go into neighborhoods who don't have a lot. They could be black, white, they could be Latino neighborhoods, and do tennis clinics for kids. Because when young men and women see a student athlete from a North Carolina state or a Florida or an FGCU or a Claremont Mud Scripps or University of Louisville, you guys are rock stars to those kids. And if you go out and they're showing them tennis, it's a lifetime sport, and you talk about education, and hey, you could go to the University of Florida, or you could go to the University of Miami. If you study and you're talking about education and you're reading to kids, and then they meet you, and they're meeting international students, they're meeting white students, they're meeting students who want to become doctors or lawyers or get into environmental science. That is, you are now giving those students who may be first generation, whose parents, for whatever reason, didn't have the opportunity to go to college. You are letting them see through the lenses of athletics and tennis, wow, I can go to college. I can do this. I can do that. And I think that's one way of going out into the community. And we know right now, given this pandemic, they're cutting tennis programs. So you, as a tennis coach, male or female, must show to the administration when they're crunching numbers, who are the programs, even though they are not revenue making, but who are the relevant programs who are having an impact in the community, who are having an impact on our campus, who are talking about the issues of right and wrong and social justice. And I think that that's one way that you can have a great influence on the community. I was blessed to, we have a lot of agencies here who work with first generation students. And we used to have tennis clinics on campus and bring the kids here. I remember one year Coca-Cola gave us backpacks and we had 150 kids. We did clinics in the inner city, brought kids to tennis matches, let them watch, let them see. And we talked about education and the process that goes to becoming a college student. But I think that's the way you have an impact on your community, because hey, if you're a college coach, you're coaching a men or women's team. Some people are coaching both. Your student athletes only have so much time outside of tennis and academics. So you got to be cognizant of that. So, but a 2-hour clinic on a Saturday morning is not too much to give to the community. And it can't just be a one-time thing, Dave. It's got to be an ongoing thing where you bring those kids on campus, you bring them to a tennis match, you have and see, this is how you make yourself linked to the institution. You invite the admissions people, the financial aid people to come and talk to these students, and you pass out information so these kids see what a brochure is from that standpoint. But I think that's one of the ways that you can have an impact on your campus community and your local community. I think one of the things when we look now at recruiting, because when you look at a lot of minority students that are Black, especially young Black kids, everyone looks at basketball and football as the way to go. And I think that one of the things, and I think the USTA is doing a good job, because they are now having that, the minority showcase for students. And it's not to exclude anybody can come to the showcase, but I think coaches need to look at those showcases that they're having up at Lake Nona, and starting to look at NJTL programs. Where are the programs that are turning out, students of color? Think about it. Many people forget that tennis and basketball are a great combination, aren't they? John Lucas, when he played at Maryland, was the ACC Player of the Year in singles and doubles twice, and the ACC Player of the Year in basketball on a pretty good Maryland team. So there is a wealth of talent that is out there that I think that we just have to find ways of working with NJTLs and with the USTA initiative of going out and finding these young men and women who can really be an asset to a sport that has given a lot to guys like you and I, Dave. Think about it. I mean, I'm a poor kid from Cambridge Springs, Pennsylvania, and tennis has given me and let me do things that I never thought I would do, and I love the sport. And I knew when I was 73 years old, I couldn't dunk a basketball, that I'd be dunking my bagels into coffee, but I can still hit a tennis ball at 73. So it truly is a lifetime sport.